Hello, everybody. This is the YBO podcast. In this episode, we continue our 6-part series of working in the outdoor industry with a very good friend of mine, Mr. Colin O'Donnell. His profession is much different from our last few guests in the fact that he is a biologist. For some, science and biology and all that sort of stuff may not seem too glamorous. However, Colin has gotten the opportunity to have some pretty epic adventures while also working on some pretty significant projects. So I hope you all enjoy this very special episode. What's up, Mr. Colin? Welcome onto the YBO podcast. Glad you can make it.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah.
Exciting, yeah.
Not too nervous, are you?
A little bit.
Okay. All right. Well, anyways, yes, welcome to the podcast. And I'll open it up for you to just go ahead and talk about yourself and who you are and what got you in the direction that you're in, I guess. So like what got you into biology and science and all that. So.
Yes, definitely. I mean, so I guess to start, I'm Colin O'Donnell. Currently, I'm a master's student at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi, right on the water. But I'm a master's in marine biology, more focused in kind of microplastic and the kind of microorganisms, the tiny creatures that live on those microplastics. But that's where I'm currently a master's student. So how I got to there and how I actually became, I guess, in love with marine science and marine biology in general. I guess it all goes all the way back to when I was a kid. I feel like this is a common story in marine science and marine biology for researchers. But when I was a kid, it is almost our family, we always traveled to the coast. And I, over time, just generally fell in love with the water and actually was terrified of the water at first, would never want to go in the water for swimming lessons, but eventually fell in love with it. And over time became more curious about it and the creatures in it, and was initially really excited about the larger organisms in the ocean. So kind of like your sea turtles, your whales, kind of those animals. But it wasn't really started, and I really didn't discover this passion until about high school, probably senior year of high school. I was still kind of looking for places to be, kind of, renewable energy sources, kind of green environment. It was all about sustainability. But when I finally found marine biology to be a goal that I could actually pursue at a university, I went for it. I had to take it. So that's where I ended up here, and actually, as a young, honestly, freshman, just wanted to get in research somehow, just really wanted to be on the water. And I thought I was going to go into big organisms, but then finally there was this one actual club on campus that was called the Islanders Stream Team, because we're called the Islanders. So the Islanders Stream Team. And what they did is actually they just took water samples at different locations at 2 different bays. So one at Corpus Christi Bay and one in Oso Bay, 2 bays in our area. And they just looked to see how much fecal bacteria, so bacteria that come from human waste or dog waste or bird waste. And they kind of looked at that, and just, it's a very common thing for the EPA. It's a huge for recreational, like water safety, kind of determining, is it safe for people to actually swim in, or are they going to get sick from it? So that's what the stream team was doing. And I fell in love with it. One of the coolest things was bacteria, when you would supply them with certain nutrients, they would actually fluoresce, and you could actually see them like under UV light. And that was super cool to me. And that's kind of when I fell into the tiny organisms, because it's something you never really think about. And honestly, I never even really knew salmonella and E. coli from contaminated meats and stuff, and about them, like they'll get you sick, but you don't. There's a whole nother world to them besides the ones that get you sick, the ones that are just in the environment naturally, and it's really cool to learn about because not many people know what they do or why they're important, but they're actually pretty vital to our oceans and the ecosystems. But so that's where I got started, was the stream team, and then from there. Basically the head professor that was behind that club and that organization, he was all about doing microbial work. So bacteria stuff with the ocean, and basically talk to him more. And the more and more I talked to him, had to push him a little harder each time I talked to him. But eventually I got helping with his PhD student, and she was doing also some more fecal indicator work. So also testing water samples for seeing if it's safe or not. So I was doing more of that, and over time got bounced around a couple projects, and then I ended up on my own project, which was really, really cool. And it was having to deal with oysters, and basically seeing if oysters in kind of two different bays at two different environments, so different parameters, different salinities, different freshwater inflows, and all this stuff can really be detrimental to oysters. And oysters in Texas especially is a pretty important stock because people eat them. People love oysters. So basically looking at them and seeing kind of what grows in them, like what kind of bacteria are residing in them, and do these different environmental conditions kind of promote growth of certain bacteria, or I guess hinder the growth of others, or even do they even affect, because even oysters can get disease themselves, just like we can get disease. And it's actually a big thing in oyster kind of, I guess, gathering or collecting, is a lot of the money can be lost from this disease, and it's dermo, if you've ever heard of it. But this dermo disease, so basically seeing if there's any kind of correlation or relationship between this bacteria and oysters and then this dermo disease. So basically seeing if these oysters are being affected by this bacteria, seeing if it can be a detriment. So that was really cool. That was a really good project. I enjoyed it. But oysters aren't really my thing. They're not really what I love to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's kind of just been research for probably 4 years now at the university, working with a professor there, and that's what I'm doing my master's under right now. But do you want me to go into like what I do now?
I mean, yeah, well, I can ask you. So, yeah, now you're a grad student, but when I know for a lot of grad programs, it's almost like, here's your project. Now you spend the duration of your grad time on a project, right? Is that same for you essentially?
Yeah. I mean, that's basically how it was. So it's almost in the sense that you as a grad student get together with a professor, and you guys kind of discuss more his opinion, because he has the money, of course, and it all revolves around the money. But it's kind of where his funding lies and where his interests are, and my interest and his interest kind of lined up. So we discussed a project, and we put together a project, and that's what I'm working on now. And it's basically there's these things called nurdles, which are kind of rice-sized plastic pellets, and every day you see plastic water bottles or you see plastic cups, but those aren't just made like that. They don't just come out of the factory as they do as a plastic water bottle. But the way to get there is they have to be molded down. So these nurdles are heated up and put into a mold that resembles whatever plastic product you want it to resemble. And then it becomes that plastic product. but those nurdles are ending up in our waterways, on railroads, anywhere where they're basically transported. So ships in the middle of the ocean, on coastal environments, on beaches, rivers, all of that. So they're becoming a pollution source. And so we're basically seeing if basically a lot of the research around these plastic pellets and particles in the ocean is trying to seeing what lives on them microbially. So what kind of bacteria or what kind of microorganism in general lives on them? Because potentially, are they eating them? Can they potentially help us reduce this plastic waste? Or is it allowing kind of like another COVID-2 coming? Like, are they going to produce a more deadly bacteria that we don't know about? So a lot of the research is focused on that, but that's all in the water, but none of it's really focused on the nurdles in the beaches. So, I mean, millions of people go to beaches every year, and it's a big, honestly, health concern that you're on these beaches and there's millions of people that can get disease from these beaches. And basically, you don't know if nurdles being on the beaches could increase that incidence of disease. So we're basically trying to look for what bacteria grow on these nurdles in the beaches. And also, are there any toxic chemicals in a sense? So another thing that plastic is really good at is absorbing chemicals when it's in the environment. So basically looking to see if, because these nurdles come from different environments and end up on the beaches, do they carry toxic chemicals that can potentially be another harmful human impact? So my study's covering large majority of human impact, but there's also kind of like a cool curiosity part to the study where it's kind of seeing, like, in general, what grows on it, because there really hasn't been anything published or even talked about in the scientific community that what grows on plastic when it's in beaches. Because beaches is a very salty environment. It's a very harsh condition, honestly, for a lot of bacteria to grow. Just like our skin's very salty and the beach is very salty. So it's very good at killing a lot of bacteria. So what's growing there, basically. So that's kind of where my project is going now. Haven't started it yet, but we're going to get to it here soon in the spring. But hoping to finish that up in about a year and a half.
Right on. Yeah, no, I know me and you have talked about that quite a bit, but I definitely wanted you to share it so anybody who's getting to listen kind of gets the same information you've told me, because, yeah, I mean, most people, like you kind of said, plastic water bottles, plastic bags, the big plastic waste, that's what we see. That's what we're used to. I mean, people thankfully we got a lot of good people out there that do stuff like the beach cleanups or stuff like that. And it sucks that the people are polluting it anyways. But yeah, most people definitely. And until you talked to me about it, I had no idea about like the microplastic side of things. And I had a faint idea from previous, science classes I've personally taken or stuff I've read about, I guess, microbiology. But yeah, definitely having you around at times is cool, but scary, because you'll start being like, hey, guess what? And tell me something I may or may not want to know, because it may like ruin my preconceived conception of, the world is blissful, but no, there could be bacteria ready to kill you right there. But yeah, no, the microplastic thing though, yeah, until you told me that, I was completely ignorant to it. But it is something that myself personally, like you kind of mentioned, the scientific community doesn't talk much about it. And I know for me personally, I've not really read or seen almost anything about that. So thank you for your service and the good work you're doing for the people.
I mean, the microbial world is definitely a crazy world. So they're everywhere. And also, I guess to add to that, kind of like the, recency of it all, like nurdles, we've known about plastic pollution. It's pretty visible. You can see that. But nurdles, for example, this being such a small pellet, it's honestly hard to find. It really is. And if you go to the beach, I challenge you to actually look for one, because they're pretty difficult, and a lot of them are in Texas. So if you do live in Texas or you ever come to the Texas coast, try to find them there. But in 2008, actually, that's when a bunch of these nurdles were found in the U.S. So there was a big science initiate called the Nurdle Patrol, and it was out of a marine science center here in Port Aransas, close to where our school is. And basically, the lead scientist or researcher on that name is Jace Tunnell. He describes it as an environmental crisis similar to a oil spill in the ocean, because it's almost in the sense of you don't know exactly where the nurdles are coming from, and it's all over the place. So it's like essentially to clean all this up, it's going to take a large sum of money, kind of like oil spills cost, to clean all this up. So it's a pretty recent environmental crisis, but nonetheless, there are many environmental crises. So.
Yeah, I mean, just a couple. I mean, I think we're fine, really. We can just keep throwing trash out the window. I'm sure it won't do anything.
Please don't.
So one of the things we've talked about before, because I believe it was in 2019, right? The internship you did in Florida?
I believe.
Because I think it was when I was doing my internship in North Carolina, but I don't remember.
I think it was the summer before that.
Was it?
Yeah, so 2018. Okay.
Well, yeah. So do you want to tell people about that internship?
So kind of, I guess, to shift away from the bacteria, because sorry if I'm being very detail oriented. I'm trying to make it less, but shift away from the smaller guys. I got a pretty cool internship. I got Moat Marine Laboratory and Aquarium. They actually do really cool internship programs for college students like me and interested in marine science, because they're a whole ordeal. They have an aquarium, awesome aquarium in Sarasota, Florida. But they have researchers in Sarasota, but they also have a branch down in the Keys. So on one of the Keys, Summerland Key to be specific, they have a whole research center there, almost dedicated to corals. They have some other researchers that look at other stuff, but their whole thing there is kind of coral recruitment and kind of putting corals back out to kind of rebuild the reef down there, because it's so disease ridden. But a really awesome experience. Never been to the Keys before this, but Keys are an awesome place. So I got down there, and I met up with basically a professor, a doctor, Dr. Robert Nowicki, and his big stuff was all about sharks, which was really, really cool. I'll talk a little more about that, but sharks, and he also looked at seagrasses, which I guess if you don't know what a seagrass is, it's quite literally in the name. It's actual grass.
It's grass, yeah.
Under the sea. Yeah. So it's a unique plant, but basically, I'll just jump right into the sharks. But he one of his I guess his doctoral work was focused on tiger sharks, but he did that in Australia. So what he wanted to kind of do is kind of transfer that program he did in Australia to the Keys and kind of get a long-term analysis, like what sharks live in the Keys, because there really hasn't been populations studies been taken about the Keys, like how many nurse sharks are here, how many lemon sharks are here. So he wants to kind of keep a live, tracker of how many sharks are there. So I got to do a little shark tagging, which is it was pretty cool. I mean, you felt like you were on Shark Week, honestly. Bringing the sharks up to the boat, people screaming at you, like, watch the tail, grab the tail, watch the mouth. Like it was, you're in the heat of the moment trying to like get the shark, not kill the shark, especially because sharks, basically once they're hooked, they release a lot of stress endorphins, and it can be quite harmful to their future once you put them out. But very cool. We get him in, and that was the thing. He actually had a number. He had a list of the important stuff. It's number one was basically your safety. Number two was the shark safety. Number three was the data, and then number four was, I guess, four list. But number four was getting photos and actually like taking a picture of the shark. Mm-hmm. So it was basically, you had to keep that in mind, because I mean, when a shark comes up on the side of the boat and it's an 8-foot lemon shark, like, you want a picture of that. Like, you're not thinking about science data, even if you're a hardcore scientist. It's just such a rare, cool experience, especially as a 20-year-old, honestly. Mm-hmm. And so basically we took all kinds of data on the sharks, from tail length to total length to girth to sex to almost anything you could get off the physical appearance of the shark. That's what kind of data we took, where it was, latitude and all that. But that was one of many projects I did down there. So another project, which also involved sharks, really cool, was basically the Dutch Caribbean kind of fishery governmental organization down in the Dutch Caribbean came to him and was like, we have these lobster traps, but they're catching a lot of nurse sharks. Mm-hmm. And we don't want we don't want to catch the nurse sharks, we don't want to kill the nurse sharks. And but we need a new trap. So he actually they came to him and asked him to design a brand new trap that could keep the lobster in so they could sell more lobster, but have the nurse sharks get out. So basically we had to go through this whole entire kind of less science and more engineering science. It was interesting because it wasn't something new to me, honestly, as a biologist and researcher. But we created this trap and we ran trials. So we got like 18 lobsters, put them in a tank. He got like 2 baby nurse sharks, and we ran trials and had recordings and basically seeing how well the sharks get in the trap, how well the lobsters get in the trap. Can the sharks get out? If they couldn't, we had to like redesign the trap, the lobster trap, and kind of just keep going at it and kind of seeing almost what trap was more effective. And eventually he found one. This is after I left there, but he found one and it was really cool. And he actually, it was like kind of the first time I got to see that science could be implemented elsewhere and not just into like a research article or kind of like presented elsewhere at conferences. But it was almost like it is the first implementation I kind of got to see of these scientific findings, which was really cool. But I also did a bunch of other work with basically seagrass and seeing if they can, kind of like I mentioned earlier, the corals down there were being ridden with disease. So instead of bleaching, which I'm sure a lot of people know about coral bleaching, but disease is also a huge problem with corals that can cause the first initial stages of bleaching. And then from there, they die off. But basically when we got there, I'll also talk about this here soon, but when we got there, disease was starting to kind of destroy the reef and move down. And you could, as my May through July of being there over the summer, you could slowly see basically the disease going down and killing the reef off, which is very sad to see. But he wanted to see if seagrasses could potentially kind of filter out these diseases that could cause coral bleachings, because there's certain bacteria actually, going back into the small world, that can cause coral bleaching and decay and degradation. So basically he wanted to see if they could act as filters, almost like a Brita filter. Could it kind of, keep away the bacteria from the corals? But unfortunately, it was kind of a preliminary study, didn't have much funding. That's the big thing in science is it's almost like where's the funding? That's where the research follows. But and it's also based off your results. But another cool thing, and kind of aside from the entire moat internship experience that I got to do in Florida, was I actually, and part of the reason I could see the coral die is I actually got to do over, I think, 18 dives exactly I got to do while being down there. It was almost like every weekend I dove, which I know you were jealous about when I told you, but man, it was very, very cool. So basically,
You just have to
every
rub that
weekend, every weekend probably got 4 dives in, and one of the reefs out there on Big Pine Key was called Lou Key, and it was kind of like almost like if you look at your finger from top down, that's what the reef looked like. So I had a bunch of fingers that you would go in, you move out, go back in the finger, move out, go back in the finger. And there were just walls of corals. Saw some Caribbean reef sharks, saw some nurse sharks, saw tarpons, and almost Goliath groupers, almost anything you could see on a reef we saw down there in this area, which was very cool experience. And I say once I hit the water, it was such a surreal experience that it's so hard to recreate anywhere else. And if you do get the chance to dive, I highly recommend it. So,
you got spoiled down there, man. Like, I want to go down there so bad, but
it's
one day.
It's absolutely, the clarity of water also just very cool, which doesn't even compare to like other places. Cause I know you've dove quite a other places that, maybe some of them got rained out, but very cool.
I did a couple dives in Hawaii, which that was insane. And that was in like late December, like right after Christmas or early January. So the water was a little bit colder, but then again, like Hawaii, their weather for the most part stays pretty consistent. So I don't think it was too crazy, but the first dive was basically in a big ass crater, and we went down about 80 feet. And at one point you're on a ledge essentially that just looks out into the deep blue. And that, I'm not going to lie, that was a little freaky because all I could envision, I've seen too many movies, was some big sea creature coming up out of the darkness and grabbing you, and you're like, oh no. But I mean, the first dive was cool, but I don't think we saw a ton because I think it was semi almost like deep enough that the coral wasn't like as intense as it was in some of the shallower parts of the islands. But the second dive was closer to shore. It was in like 20 feet of water, so the water was a lot warmer too, which was nice. My first dive, I was struggling. I was like shivering the whole time. I was like, oh my god. But the second one, it was warm. There were friggin' turtles everywhere. We had an octopus swimming around, and it inked up on us. Like we got a little too close, so it went.
Dang. That's actually really cool.
It was, dude. It was. I was far enough back. I got a picture of it. So, I mean, it was pretty cool for me, but I think it was our guide saw the octopus at first, pointed it out, it swam away a little bit, and we kind of started swimming over, and he kind of started peeking around a piece of coral, and I guess the octopus dove in and hid right behind that part. And as he came around, all I see is a big old dark cloud of ink, and I just start laughing. Which obviously, if you're in your regulator, you don't have room to laugh. You're just going
bubbles just floating everywhere.
Yeah. So that one was pretty cool. And then I got to do a dive in Bora Bora back in, what was that? 2017, I think. Was it? Yeah, it was 2017. We went to Bora Bora, and I got to go dive in there, and it was like, I think the deepest we ever got was 50 feet, but that was honestly cooler than the Hawaii dive. Because the Hawaii dive, we weren't hitting any crazy spots, but over in Bora Bora, the way the island sits and all that stuff, it was kind of similar to what you're pointing out about the whole finger thing where you're at. where it was going in and out of cuts, but I don't think we really had specifically any fingers. It was more of just like ridges of coral up and down and then canyons that went through. And so, yeah, we were diving literally up and down into these canyons. And at times we're like at the bottom, and one of the guides would turn around and signal, like, look up. And I know whoever's listening can't see the hand motions I'm making, but there's a signal for kind of like stingrays or eagle rays. And they would like stop us, point, like look up and gesture what it was. And these just big old eagle rays were floating over the canyon. I mean, they owned the place, dude. It was cool. And so you were sitting on the canyon floor essentially looking up, and you're just like, yep, this is their home, not ours, you know.
Exactly.
So yeah, I've done a couple dives, but definitely not as many as you have. You're winning by a long shot.
I mean, you've been to more extravagant places, I'd say. So
I don't know, dude. Key West, I feel like it's up there. I think it's the accessibility of Key West is what makes it not as like, oh my God, it's the craziest place ever, you know, because it's not that hard to go down to Key West and go diving and stuff like that. To go out to Hawaii, Bora Bora, you know, some of these more exotic places way off farther, you have to go farther, you know. So
yeah,
I don't know.
definitely.
I think there's something about a place as cool as Key West in our backyard, essentially, available to us it's pretty cool too. So
I mean, it's pretty rare. There's only really 2 reefs, if you really count it, on kind of close to, you know, U.S., like the continental U.S., and that's the Keys. And then you have the Texas Flower Gardens, but that's 130 miles off the coast. So
yeah, and it's fairly deep, isn't it? If I remember correctly, like
yeah, it is fairly deep, like 60 to 100 feet.
Yeah, it's down there.
Yeah.
I mean, I know we do have a lot of one cool thing that the U.S. has done is really gone hard on like the artificial reefing, like to try to supplement a lot of reefs being lost by putting those there. I know off the Texas coast, they've done a lot of these where they've sank ships and different stuff like that. The oil rigs out here, I love telling people, I'm like, you know, I am all for trying to get into the renewable resources and stuff like that, but it is pretty cool that you have these oil rigs that go out for something like our fossil fuels, but even though they do have their problems, they have actually presented some solutions. Whereas a lot of oil rigs go out of commission, and I know a lot of groups are like, "Don't you tear those down, dude? Those have become big, thriving reefs, and if you do that, you just lose all those organisms and stuff like that." So,
no, they can definitely become hotspots for biodiversity in the ocean, because a lot of the open ocean, it's almost like there's nothing there to grasp onto. The animals can't grasp onto it. But like as soon as you stick a metal pole down there that can start to, you know, gather stuff that can grow there and accumulate and provide nutrients, then you have where fishes come, and then those smaller fishes attract bigger fishes, and then those bigger fishes attract, you know, your apex predators like your sharks and stuff.
Yeah.
They can be vital despite their some negative effects.
It's the oh gosh, what are they called? Like
the equilibrium.
No, like teeter totters or whatever.
The seesaws.
Yeah, it's kind of like the seesaw effect where trying to get that balance point is damn near impossible. It's, you know, it goes back and forth nonstop. But well, to break off from this, because we're kind of going down a pigeonhole here.
Yeah, we are.
I do have kind of 2 more main questions for you. One would be, so you've mentioned a lot of your work thus far, or interest thus far, has been microbiology, essentially, within the marine ecosystems. Do you foresee that being what you want to do rest of your life, or do you kind of want to hop around, or like you were saying, you got to go tag sharks and mess with coral reefs and all these other aspects, and even to some degree the engineering aspect of with your science and stuff like that. So with experiences like that, are those kind of things that you take as, oh, that was fun the one time, or do you want to jump around a little bit?
So I guess I'll preface it by saying there's kind of um, three areas that I could see kind of where I'd be going, and one of them is plastics. So kind of, are we able to degrade these plastics, because so much of our plastic that we use now can't be degraded. Well, I say they can't be, but when I say they can't be, it's almost taking hundreds of years, so not even close to our lifetime. They can be degraded. So can we speed up that process somehow? Because our plastic production is definitely not slowing down. So can we kind of degrade that somehow? Another aspect would be corals. I think corals are almost key to the oceans, as they house a ridiculous amount of our biodiversity. I don't want to say percentage because I don't want to be wrong here, but they house ridiculous amounts of biodiversity, which I think coral disease, in a sense, and also coral bleaching, and kind of, I don't know, implementing solutions to try to rebuild those coral reefs are really cool. Kind of like you mentioned, like artificial reefs, in a sense. Kind of seeding that with proper algae and other things to allow more corals to grow. And then the third thing is, I've always loved, my actual favorite animal, and even in the entire animal kingdom, is an orca whale. So I think doing everything with orcas and just seeing that their populations are so heavily hurt. I think one subpopulation is at around 70 individuals last time I checked. So just everything about an orca whale is so cool to me. So I think, I don't know, from taking a microbiome sample, because it's just kind of like our microbiome in a sense, where we're learning that so much of our body as well kind of comes from those microorganisms. And if you want to upset your gut bacteria, it can lead to even more kind of negative effects in the long run of your body. So same thing kind of for an animal, is seeing how healthy are they according to their guts and stuff like that. And also simply just looking at their migration. So much of these larger animals, and honestly, a lot of the animals in the ocean, we don't have a whole picture on. Like, we don't know where they travel. Like, we have some understanding of their breeding, their feeding, all of this, but there's not total understanding of how these animals go about their daily life. So kind of, those are kind of my areas of where I'd want to go. I'd also, so like, for example, the shark stuff, that experience was one of a kind. Like it's breathtaking, but it's almost like, I don't know. I didn't feel the passion. Like, if you do some things, like for you, photography and taking photos and being part of, a featured film, that was like, I want more of that. Right. That was your feeling, but it was awesome tagging sharks, but it wasn't like, I need to do more of this. And it's almost that feeling of, I need to do something. That's kind of what drives me. And it's having that passion for something constantly driving you is what I think you need to be successful as well. But those are kind of my areas. And I think at this point in my career, I did want to go directly to a PhD after a master's. But after being in the master's for 2 semesters now, I think a break would be beneficial. And even honestly, if I do find a great job that allows me to pursue one of these dreams, or even possibly move around and get some of these dreams done, I don't think a PhD might not be on my radar. I'm not sure, but eventually, increasing the science knowledge base and also kind of pursuing my dreams as well. So
and I mean, hey, a PhD will be there whenever you decide to go back for it. So
exactly, universities aren't leaving. So
I mean, they're doing all right financially. So,
Exactly.
yeah, that's kind of me with the idea of masters is I definitely think I want to get a master's. Because I think inevitably too, I think I'd really enjoy to teach. Like I feel like I'm one of those people that would want to go teach because I've had some great teachers that have led me where I'm at. And honest God, where I'm at today, a big part of it is because of certain people that I've had in my educational career. So I could see pursuing a master's similar to you with PhD, but at the moment, I need some money. I need to establish some stability in my life because whoo.
Sadly, unfortunately, the money does drive everything. So
Yeah, I mean, it both sucks, but also makes a lot of sense. I mean, if if somebody's not paying you to do certain job, like a janitor's not going to go around and clean up a bathroom for free. Like, get out of here, you know. So,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, it sucks about it, but it makes sense, I guess. So, but no, I was also going to point out you should definitely go do something with the orcas, and you should bring one of your best buddies in the whole world along with you.
I know you always say that, and I will.
Dude, I
I
mean,
will say photography underwater is also something totally cool, but I understand I don't think that's for me. So I
yeah,
definitely need
I mean,
someone there.
hey, practice a little bit. You never know, but in all fairness, too, some of my all-time favorite photographers or filmmakers are actually science people. Like, I think me and you have talked about a photographer named Paul Nicklin.
Mm-hmm.
Spends a lot of time up in the Arctic, but he was a biology kid because he lived up there and he's like, oh man, I love this. And biology's how to get there. And inevitably he's picked up a camera and hasn't looked back at the science stuff. He's just stuck with photography. And I mean, look at him, man. He's one of the most world renowned photographers and educates people left and right on stuff like that. So, but no, that's cool though, buddy. I will say before we sign off, my final question or final thing I want you to kind of talk about is if anybody's listening that is interested in, I guess, biology as a whole, because obviously not everybody's going to be interested in the microbiology, but all science or all biologists and scientists kind of in your field kind of start in that general same direction. Like you go to biology and stuff like that and it breaks off, right? So what would you say for anybody interested or wanting to know how to get into it or wants to know more about it? What would be some advice or things that you would tell the next group?
Definitely. I mean, that's a really good question. And I'd say the number one biggest thing is just don't be afraid. Like there is always professors out there, people out there, companies, everything that are doing so many different things with the ocean and so many uh, looking at so many different research projects to get your, I guess, dip your toes in all those projects. Like, don't sit there and if you think microbiology is what you want to do, and after 6 months you're done and you had a fun time and it was not for you, don't be afraid to leave and don't be afraid to communicate that with that person you were working with or getting kind of increasing your, I guess, science bubble with. Always increase that science bubble and don't be afraid to start the science bubble as well. So the scariest thing, and I guess in my personal experiences as kind of a college student, is talking to that professor and getting to, understand what they're doing. But professors, they don't like, what they love the most is to talk about what they're doing. So as a young scientist and as someone who's looking to kind of find the field they want to go into, and even if it's like you want to do marine biology and you just really don't like it, you can ask a geology professor if you want to go into geology. There's nothing that hurts there as long as you show that you're a hardworking person and willing to give it your all and give it your best. Honestly, they're willing to take the risk on you and allow you to learn and, learn from them, learn from their PhD students. So I think the biggest thing is, and that's the biggest thing I learned along the way, is don't be a don't be afraid to self-reflect and be like, did I really enjoy that experience?
Mm-hmm.
Like, could I see myself doing that every day? Like, do I have the passion for it? Is it really fun? Um, would I really want to look at fecal indicator bacteria every day? I mean, no, and that's why I've kind of changed, because it was really cool, but it's not something that I don't want to do every day. So,
Yeah.
um,
That's a great example though, dude. I love that.
don't be afraid. I mean, that's the biggest thing, and it's the hardest thing to, I guess, say from my position right now, because even
Mm-hmm.
I get nervous. Like, I don't. There's still times where I get nervous and I have to talk to my own professor, and it's the dude that I oversee and I talk to basically every day. Like, I still get nervous, so it's really hard to say. I understand it's really hard to go and do it, and it's easy to say from right here, but taking that first big leap into something is almost so rewarding. And the scariest thing that could happen is they tell you, like, sorry, we don't have spots, or no, I don't think your research goals align with ours. And
Yeah.
you move on, you find the next one. And it's simply the biggest thing. And I think as more students are going into college, they're actually struggling with trying to find what they like or what they love. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's a big thing. It's almost like our high schools, and not to get too long-winded here, but our high schools, they don't prepare you for kind of what everything college has to offer. And
Yeah.
it's one of those things that to get what college has to offer, you have to experience it. It's not going to come to you. You kind of have to forcefully go and experience all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So as a young scientist, stick with it. Don't be afraid. Always be sure to communicate your science, talk to science, be curious. That's the biggest thing, is try to learn, try to go through every day being curious and trying to learn something new, either about your field or another field. And it will go a long way in rewarding you and kind of helping you get that network. Because as everyone loves to say, it's all about networking, but it really is talking to people and understanding their experiences, their research, why they do it. It will help you to be, do I really want to do this? Do I want to be a professor? Kind of like you were saying, like you think you want to teach, like,
Mm-hmm.
because you enjoy sharing information with others and talking and allowing others to, have that realization moment of, oh, I get it. That's how you do it. And it's personally, that's not what I would like, but I learned that because I was a tutor. I was an SI. I am a teaching assistant now. So
Mm-hmm.
I've had those experiences. And the biggest thing is you'll never truly know that you don't like an experience if you don't ever do it. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you have to experience that to be like, no, I don't like that. So always be open, always willing to experience different kind of fields of science, and don't limit yourself. Don't think just because you're on this one track that you have to stay on this one track. There's always an ability to move elsewhere, different careers, um, and just kind of be curious as you go along.
Right on, dude. No, I like that's a way better answer than I thought. I thought you might have give like, oh, make sure you take some science classes. No, dude, you just went deep. No,
Yeah, I mean,
that's
yeah,
yeah, no, that's very good advice though. I see, as we've talked about, I've been very interested in science, and I looked into the direction of marine biology, and that's how I ended up down there at A&M Corpus. But I realized that it was just not for me, and I had no problem saying, you know what, tap out. This isn't for me. I need to pursue other things. And inevitably that's got me where I'm at. And so far I've been pretty happy with my career choice and stuff like that. So yeah, I really like that. Don't be afraid to, I guess, bring it back a little bit. Don't be afraid. YOLO, man. Just go for it. So,
and I think the other biggest thing is self-reflection too. Always building upon yourself, seeing what you want to do.
Yeah.
Kind of, like you took a step back and were like, man, I'm really good at photography. I love doing this. I love the science part of it.
Yeah.
What kind of blends those two? Wildlife photography. And from there you took away and you went with it. And now look at the photos you take. So it's understanding that your self-reflection can lead you to new areas and new experiences. And that's the biggest thing. And that's kind of the basics of science is being curious. I mean, the word science is, when you think of science, it's all about, trying to determine the unknown. And I think, tackling that unknown is always an important role in, trying to find a career.
Yeah. Well, coolio, buddy. I think we're pretty much out of time, but I want to thank you again for jumping on here and sharing a little bit about you and some of the experiences you've had. And I love the advice you gave at the end. I know that's been something I've struggled with personally. And honestly, I think every single person I've known has been in the same boat where they're just like, oh, screw it, man. I'm already on this train. I can't really jump ship at this point, but it's like, hey, sometimes you have to, and look at where it'll take you. So,
yep.
But
as long as you keep the passion behind it, you can take it.
Yeah, I like that. Well, thank you, buddy, and hopefully we'll have you back on here in the near future for to see where you're at, or if you're playing with killer whales, we're definitely bringing you back on here. Because
I'd be happy. Yeah.
I mean, preferably I'll join you with that one, and we'll make a movie about it. I don't know.
We can share the feature film on that.
Yeah, there you go. All right, boss man. Thank you for joining us. So
yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on. Glad to share the experience. Stay curious.